Hello, everybody, and welcome to Rugby on Fair Sports for today's Six Nation Round 3 review. A very interesting weekend, and who would have thought it? But 3 weeks ago, let's go back about a month ago when the Six Nations was about to begin. A side like Wales, we were saying that their character, they weren't quite the side that they were under Warren Gatland, struggling a little bit, needed to try and really find their identity, and find ways of winning and trying to get back to being their best. Well, Wales are currently 2 games away from a potential Six Nations Grand Slam after they won the Triple Crown this weekend, beating England 40 points to 24 in a very controversial game. Lots of refereeing decisions which have caused a lot of uproar between the fans, between officials, between players, coaches, and everything like that. We're not going to talk too much about that. And then also Ireland getting their first victory of the tournament with a whopping 48-10 demolition of Italy. So before we get into the games themselves, please do subscribe to the channel. Smash a like on the video as well. Let me know in the comments what you thought about the games. If you have any more comments about the refereeing and about what the sort of situation in the Wales England game. But before we get there, Ireland 48, Italy 10 points. Italy once again just completely taken apart, but Ireland looking so much better, and they just completely outclassed the Italians. It really was a really good performance by the men in green. And I mean, speaking of officiating, a really poor decision really early on with a try that wasn't given, despite going to the TMO, where Henderson had grounded the ball and in grounding had lost forward and it wasn't giving. So it is a big sort of cause for concern, the officiating in the tournament, as is, the officiating everywhere in the world at the moment. I think referees are really in the spotlight at the moment, and sort of the implications not being quite good enough, and needs to be something that is rectified, because the last thing you want to do whenever you watch a match or whenever you review something is look back and think that the officials played a bigger part than they should have. And I really don't like the whole referee conversation. I always think that, especially when you lose, it comes across as sour grapes. But there are also definitely times where you are very just. You can definitely justify your grievances and can feel that you've been hard done by. But in terms of the Italy-Ireland game, I mean, Ireland just dominated in absolutely every single facet, scoring 6 tries to 1. 23 defenders beaten to just the 3 by Italians, 6 clean breaks, 13 turns conceded to the 12 of Italy, so that was quite even. But I mean, in terms of the defensive effort, the Italians missed 27 tackles and made 143. Ireland also made 143 tackles, but missed just 3, and that's how you win games. When you miss just 3 tackles, you're not going to concede points. That's just it. As long as you've got a decent defensive structure and you make your tackles, that was what you're going to win your games. And I mean, 8 turnovers won as well. So that was the problem with Italy. They just couldn't, sort of hang on to the possession, losing too many turnovers, missing too many tackles, just generally being outplayed. Iraq's won 51% for Ireland, 43% for Italy. The maul was really useful for Ireland. They won 8 of their mauls opposed to the 2 for Italy. In terms of set plays, Ireland lost 2, and Italy's 1. Italy won 4 scrums to Ireland's 1. Ireland lost just the 1 scrum. Percentage-wise, the Italians had the better scrum percentage of 67% to 70%. But in terms of discipline, 18% of penalties conceded by Italy. You can't win matches. You can't even hope to compete in matches against quality opposition if you're going to concede 18 penalties. We're going to talk about the penalty count for England in a minute. But I mean, that's just it. I mean, Ireland were just completely outplayed Italy. And you look at the defensive effort, there were some big contributions by Italy. Something like David Ceci making 13 tackles. Luca Bigi was phenomenal. He made 18 tackles, missed just the 1, and won a turnover. I thought he was really, really impressive at hooker. So, yeah, I mean, Michael Morrow made 14 tackles, but there's just too many tackles being missed here. Somebody like Luca Sperendio missing 3 tackles, making just 2. Monteoni missing 4 tackles, making just 1. It's not really good enough, and you feel sorry for people like Carlo Cano, who made, 13 tackles. He missed 2, and that's always the issue. But, there were players in the Italian side that were making the tackles, making the contributions, but being let down at other parts of the park. Ireland, on the other hand, I mean, there's some incredible tackle statistics. Will Connors made 16 tackles, won 2 turnovers, and didn't miss 1 tackle. To add to that, he had a brace of tries. I mean, what a game it was. I mean, an absolute masterclass really from him, and really announced himself in a major way. Had a bit of a quiet tournament. Got the chance against Italy and really made it count. 2 tries, a brilliant defensive effort, and a fantastic effort from him. CJ Stander also getting on the ball. Jonathan Sexton back and kicking 18 points. Gary Rimrose got himself a try, as did Hugo Keenan as well. The sole try scorer for Italy was Jan Meyer and Pollock obviously contributed with 5 points from the boot. Now, in terms of the England-Wales game, a game where stats-wise, you can understand why England are so frustrated, because they clawed themselves back into a game that they would argue they were outdone by officials. And I think, the knock-on, it's a very strange decision. You can kind of understand both ways. I mean, he kind of seems to be knocking the ball forward, but when it comes to off his leg, then the argument is that it comes off his leg, therefore it's not forward. So, lots of sort of controversy about that. But the big one was sort of when Owen Farrell asked to talk to his team, and then, England hadn't set up, and Wales said, was the time on? Cool. Dan Biggle cross kick, and Josh Adams ran over. And Owen Farrell was fuming about that, and, kind of kept dodging the bullet afterwards, and, it wasn't a great post-match interview, but to be fair, they were kind of asked, please, comment on it, and they said that they didn't want to because they know they'll get in trouble, clearly saying that they don't agree with the decision and that they thought that they were hard done by. It's a difficult one. You can kind of understand that he did ask for time. The referee sort of implying that he should have sort of set up afterwards, have your word and then set up. So it's a very difficult one, and I think, you can understand why there's so much sort of uproar about it. And if you look at the stats, it was a very even game. So, you take out those 14 points, and Wales is still edging about 2 points. And I think at the end of the day, Wales were the better side. They were the better side. And, scoring the try right at the end just to top it off just showed that overall I thought it was a very even game, but Wales definitely deserved the victory. And even Owen Farrell and Eddie Jones, they said they were worthy winners on the day. And I think they were. And I think, a lot more needs to be given to Wales, who I think have been criticised for, having to only beat 14 men, but what are they supposed to do? And then they've come across a very experienced English side and beaten them. But if you look at the stats, 47% possession to Wales, 53% to England, the 4 tries to 2. Wales beat 4 defenders, whereas England beat 15. England 3 clean breaks to Wales 1. Turnovers conceded, England 11, Wales 10. In terms of defence, Wales made 114 tackles, missing 14. England made 120 tackles, missing just 3. So, it was a lot of positives to take away from England. 8 turnovers won by Wales, 4 by England. In terms of the breakdown, 50% ruck success rate for Wales, 42% for England. 6 balls won by Wales, 2 by England. And in terms of your discipline, 13 penalties conceded by England, just the 9 by Wales. And that was really it. And I think, that they called out, or the journalists in the post-match called out Maury Toja, who was guilty of conceding 5 penalties himself. Almost half the penalty count was Maury Toja, who's such a disciplined player and such an important player. So, it is an aspect that England needs to fix. I think that they were very good in large parts of the game, and their defense was very good, and their structures looked pretty good. But you cannot concede 13 penalties. One player cannot concede 5 penalties by himself. It's just not on. So that'll be a big area of concern. And, people making an interesting point. You look at all the Saracens players and the fact that England have got so many Saracens players, the fact that they're not playing club rugby, is that a problem? Do they need to maybe relook at the selection policy and start picking players who are playing more as opposed to sort of just picking on reputation? Which is really difficult. I mean, how do you leave somebody like Maury Toja off? I mean, he's been one of the best locks in the world for the past few years. But, then you look at a performance like that and think, well, maybe he shouldn't be playing. In terms of Wales, the try scorers were Kieran Hardy, Josh Adams, Liam Williams, and then Dan Biggar kicked off his boot, 7 points. And then in terms of England point scorers, 14 points from Owen Farrell, a try from Ben Youngs, as well as a very good try from Anthony Watson. In terms of the big defenders on the day, always a big effort from Josh Navidi back from injury there. He made 14 tackles. Justin Tupurik and Falatau made 10 and 11 tackles respectively. In terms of the English, quite a few big defensive efforts. Jamie George made 10 tackles, didn't miss one. Maury Toja made 13 tackles, missing 1. Tom Curry made 15 tackles, didn't miss 1 either. And Mark Wilson with 12 tackles. Owen Farrell also making 10 tackles. So a very good defensive effort from England, but just, weren't quite disciplined enough. And I think, we're not going to talk about too much about the officials. At the end of the day, Wales were better. But more importantly, can Wales do it? They will go up against Italy on the 13th of March, and then they will be up against France, assuming they beat Italy, as they probably should, will suddenly be up against France for a potential to not only take the Six Nations, but to actually win a Grand Slam, which will be incredible for a Wales side, which I don't think too many people gave a chance. For England, it really is back to the drawing board, pretty much out of the tournament already, and, then you start to wonder, is this now the time to start blooding more players? You look at the standings, and England lost 6 points, with Wales at 14. They're out of the competition, really. So it's a 2-horse race between Wales and France. Scotland obviously can still jump into that if they win their sort of game in hand. They can get up to sort of 9-10 points as well. But as I say, I think it now becomes an interesting time for England. Do they continue with the sort of the tried and tested, or do they now say, right, well, we're out of the Six Nations, we're not going to defend our title, we're going to use this now to start building our team, trying to find different combinations and maybe sort of looking at how we're going to, improve in the long run. It's also an opportunity for some players to try and put their hands up for line selection whenever that tour goes ahead. But a very interesting weekend of Six Nations Rugby. Let me know what you thought of it down below. Smash like on the video. Please do subscribe. My name is Steven, and I'll chat to you soon.